Hello viewer, here we are in the barn with all of my stored joists and spare things, and also the barrel. So today's task is to try and turn this barrel into two flower pots, albeit rather large flower pots. Now you can see that one of the Cooper's rings has fallen off at the bottom and should be at this point here. So one of the first tasks before we start cutting this in half is to try and get that ring back in position. So I think what we're probably going to do is try and roll out the barrel and try and take it outside so that we've actually got some space to work. And we'll flip it upside down, put the ring in position and try and knock it tight onto the wood. So that's probably the first task. Obviously, all of my new wood joists underneath this blue tarpaulin, all of that's in the way. So somehow I'm going to have to do a bit of moving around in order to get that barrel out. So I'll stick you on a tripod and start moving things around. Right. As you can probably tell, I am not a professional cooper. So I have a strange angle iron, which I happen to find in amongst my scrap metal, which I'm hoping will do the job, and a hammer. I haven't even watched a video on YouTube of how to do this, but we're going to give it a go. Now, my understanding of Cooper's rings is that the staves of the barrel are slightly curved, and the Cooper's rings hold it all in tension so that it keeps all the wood together and stops any leaks. That means that if I just cut halfway between the rings, the staves will splay out. So I'm going to cut a little bit towards the center from one of those rings and leave a little bit in the center, maybe 30 centimeters in the center, just cut out and use for firewood. Hopefully that will mean that there's minimal amount of splaying out of the wood, but we'll see what happens. Obviously that was an old cider barrel, and as you'd expect, there's no cider left in it. However, critters get into these things, so come and have a look. So if you're a mouse looking for somewhere to live, you go and live in a cider barrel maybe. Or die in the cider barrel. Anyway, that's worked out quite well. So there's, as you can see, there's minimal splaying of the staves. That should keep in position, and it's fairly thick. It's probably oak, possibly chestnut. We can fill that up with dirt, and bearing in mind that it had liquid in it for a long, long time, that should actually last for a while. So I'll stick you back over here and I'll cut up the other one. Well, that's a good job. You've seen that Carl did all of our gravelling and made a sort of a parking area up by the side of the Colombage. Well, Frank and Sabine saw that the gravel was quite attractive, so they asked Carl to do gravelling up to their house as well. So that means we've got this large area of gravel, but obviously there's no division between theirs and ours. So we brought over some benches from our other house and created a sort of a barrier. So Frank and Sabine were looking at it going, right, that'll be drinks on the terrace or afternoon tea in the summer. So let's just turn you around and you can see what we mean. Sorry about being into the sunlight. So there's Frank and Sabine's house, and there's this large area of gravel, and we've just put these benches and that table and the old cable drum in position to create a bit of a line. Now the cadastra shows the boundary, and I'll just put a quick picture up for that. The boundary goes between this gate post here and a position just to the side of that electric pylon right there. So that's what we did. We just put a line of the benches and that little table and this cable drum and just put it in position to create a bit of a boundary. So Frank and Sabine can have guests that can park on that side, and this is the driveway into our parking area. Now these benches we got at auction in the UK. They were actually retired from some Eastern European railway, and the metal ends is what we bought at the auction. I bought the slats over here from a scierie and assembled the benches. But the intriguing thing about them is that the backs can flip sides. Now they were designed, they've got holes at the bottom of the legs, so they would have been bolted to the platform. But they're just rather nice. Now this is just, it could be just a temporary arrangement, just to sort of create the small amount of a barrier. But now that we've got our two tubs, we'll probably just add those into this to create maybe a flower bed in two places. So we'll roll them across and see what happens. those barrels, the staves, are probably 30 millimeters thick. And when the barrel was in its entirety, it was about 1.8 meters tall. We could probably work out how many liters that was. By the way, they would have been expensive to buy, and we just had it in the barn. What's next? I should go off and find something else to do. Hopefully see you again soon.